I'm Heather Dewey. I'm a history major, though I have minors in Spanish, International Studies, and Creative Writing, and I'm actually hoping to graduate at the end of this semester, which would be spring 2017. I really kind of think that history is one of the more misunderstood majors because a lot of students look at it and think it's going to be very cut and dry. They think it's going to be very boring. But in actuality, a lot of the fun things about a history major is you learn that a lot of history isn't very concrete. I mean, you learn a lot about the past and how it affects the present. You're learning a lot about who gets mentioned in histories and who tends to get left out. You learn a lot about kind of politics because you learn about how political historical narratives are developed to kind of try to further certain ends. I think one of the best examples I've heard is Dr. Liv Shiz, who does a lot of the Eastern European and Russian studies, calls it the grand master narrative of the Soviet Union because they completely rewrote their history and all of a sudden that was what the established history said. So I think a lot of students, when they look at it, they think it's going to be very boring, but it actually teaches you a lot about interpreting what you read, interpreting sources. It really changes the way you look at the world when you actually get to learn more about the situations. Oh man, there's actually quite a bit you can do with a history degree. I'm a bit more the traditionalist. I'm trying to get a PhD in history because I just want to research and teach. A lot of history majors actually end up going to higher level programs like becoming lawyers, becoming archaeologists. You end up with museum curators, tour guides. Anytime the government wants to build anything new in a certain site, they'll usually bring in historians to make sure there's not something of historical significance there that they need to be careful about. Government positions in general are actually really great for history majors to get into. It all really depends on how you want to spin the skills that you learn in your degree, especially because when you're a history major, you learn a lot about researching and interpreting and then how to present the information in writing. And those are skills that actually get used a lot in businesses, for lawyers, for any research position actually. So it's just, what do you want to do with it? I will admit I was that awkward little freshman who wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, and I'd always loved history. It was my favorite class. I honestly knew I wanted to spend as much time researching it as much as possible. Apparently when I was little I used to run up to my mom and say I was going to be professor and then run away. So I mean, I figured why not go that route and try to do it that way. But no, really, I didn't really have much of a plan into it, except I knew I wanted to go on to grad school, so I just kind of entered the field and let it go from there. I mean, I think the biggest thing to say for students who want to be history majors is you don't have to know what you want to do right away. Take time and kind of let it develop. I didn't know what I was going to do right away, and now I've got 3 or 4 different projects that I have spinning, so I mean, kind of just goes from there. Honestly, a lot of the minors were just keyed on my interests. I knew I wanted to learn another language, especially because it's very useful for history, but also because we live in a very multilingual world, and being able to speak in another language really opens up new avenues for you. You get to talk to so many different people. You get to read so much literature that you might not have even known existed just because you didn't understand it. International studies kind of fed into that, especially with the history, because there's kind of a lot of study on how histories in different countries kind of interact and impact each other, because the history we learn in the United States is not the history they learn in Ukraine. It's not the history they learn in the Congo. So it was really interesting to see how people interact that way. Creative writing was actually because that's my other interest, and me and my sister, who's an artist and illustrator, have actually been working on quite a few different story projects we want to self-publish. So it just seemed like something fun to do while I was in college. I've been in the honors program since I was a freshman, and that really helps you kind of get in contact with other students and sort of get used to meeting people from different fields that you might not have originally. I've actually been with the Writing Center for 4 years. I'm one of the lead consultants and in charge of the, we do like online consulting where you'll send your paper in and we'll try to get it connected to someone and they'll look at it within 2 to 3 days and you get it back with comments. So I'm in charge of that. I'm the online coordinator. I did a lot of like independent research projects. I did the history undergraduate conferences where you can actually present your work to like professors and anyone who's willing to come and listen. And I did the poster symposiums, which was really the same thing. Independent research-wise, I used my senior thesis as an excuse for me to study the mass exhumations of Spanish graves, which, and every time I say that, people give me weird faces like, why would you want to study that? But it's actually really interesting. I managed to connect it to a lot of topical areas of history, such as history and memory, the idea of like a collective memory, what groups as this sort of like what groups actually think of themselves. It's very different from what the scholarly memory might say. It's kind of like, think of it as pop culture memory. What has become popular? How have people started to view history, and how does it differ from what the scholarly record says about people? I've done creative writing independent studies to kind of give me a break and kind of work on some of my other interests, and right now I'm actually co-authoring an article with Dr. Weiner about some Latin American history and human rights. So I mean, it didn't seem like a lot at the beginning, but it kind of builds on you. I also work for the computer science department as a grant writer and editor, so it adds up. Don't be afraid to try new things. I know you see signs everywhere that say things like your life begins when you get out of your comfort zone, but it honestly does. You get so many opportunities and you get to meet so many people. Do not be afraid to talk to your professors. I was terrified of my professors, and they're all honesty really great people. I've never met a professor who wasn't willing to meet with you, who wasn't willing to just discuss the work with you. I mean, they do this for a living. They love getting to talk about this stuff. Well, like I said, I'm really hoping to hear back from PhD programs so I can go on to a doctoral program. I have some really exciting stuff that I've been doing kind of with how political ideologies affect scholarly memory, which is how history is written about. I do a lot of that in places like Chile, Bolivia, Peru, and Spain, kind of getting that international and global perspective. So I'm really excited to actually get to go out and write more about this and do more research about it. And also really excited that I get to co-author an article, because that's been a very big thing for me.